hear the media discuss their fears around a dictatorship. What exactly does that mean? Oxford Dictionary defines a dictator as a ruler with total power over a country, typically one who has obtained control by force. Dictatorships are often characterized by a suspension of elections and civil liberties, proclamation of a state of emergency, rule by decree, repression of political opponents, not abiding by the procedures of the rule of law, and the existence of a cult of personality centered on the leader. Less than 3 weeks before the 2020 election, Joe Biden proclaimed, "I have this strange notion we are a democracy. If you can't get the votes, you can't legislate by executive order unless you're a dictator. We're a democracy. We need consensus." Ironically, in Joe's first week in office, he signed 37 executive orders and actions. That's 33 more than the guy he indirectly referred to as a dictator. It's 32 more than his old boss, Barack Obama, and 37 more than George W. Bush, who signed 0 in his first week as president. The unilateral signing of these executive orders led to Russia and Venezuela benefiting from a Keystone-less U.S. in filling the energy void, which cost many American jobs and destroyed American energy independence. China was quite pleased that the U.S. rejoined the Beijing-friendly Paris Climate Accord. This decision put a strain on the U.S. economy and was detrimental to American businesses. Even the New York Times editorial board called on the president to pump the brakes on governing exclusively by executive fiat. Their headline read, "Ease up on the executive actions, Joe. President Biden is right not to let his agenda be held hostage, but legislating through Congress is a better path." Over the last 3 years, Americans have gone through so much together. The Biden administration called on OSHA to enforce COVID mandates, an infringement on personal freedoms, which forced businesses to close, mass job losses, forced a downturn in the economy, and had a significant impact on the mental health of the American people, including children. In a disgraceful move, Joe Biden kicked unvaxxed soldiers and Marines out of the military in August of 2022. In order to ensure Americans were unable to voice their opposition to his rule, the Biden administration worked with social media companies to suppress dissenting opinions while also creating the Disinformation Governance Board. In an excerpt from a book called The Last Politician, Inside Joe Biden's White House and the Struggle for America's Future, Franklin Foer covers the dynamics inside the White House during the summer of 2021 during the Afghanistan withdrawal. Foer details how Joe Biden was determined to get out of Afghanistan no matter the cost. Even in the face of significant pushback from senior military advisors, he overrode all of their concerns and recommendations and executed an absolutely catastrophically bad decision. How about Joe's student loan forgiveness plan? The Supreme Court ruled that Biden's plan was unconstitutional. But did Joe Biden back down? He did not. In a move that would make even Machiavelli proud, he decided to press on, finding ways to forgive student loan debt despite the Supreme Court's ruling. A brazen display of executive power and a disregard for the rule of law. Joe's red speech was entertaining to make fun of, but what many missed is the totalitarian imagery, red hue, and presence of uniformed Marines while discussing the battle for the soul of the nation, and bashing MAGA Republicans, which can be seen as a dangerous call to action by the president, something his predecessor could never have gotten away with in the media. A president who consistently called for the defunding of our law enforcement and open borders has now caused mass undue suffrage and security concerns for families and citizens across the country. According to the latest report by U.S. Customs and Border Protection, since Joe Biden took office, due to the increase in encounters with criminal aliens, assaults, rapes, and homicides are all on the rise. Since Joe Biden took office, the United States has provided Ukraine more than $113 billion in aid. Much of this funding has, in fact, been funneled by the Biden administration without congressional approval. Tactics used to keep the funds flowing include tapping into the Pentagon's budget and reallocating funds meant for other purposes. It's like a game of financial twister, with Biden stretching the limits of his executive powers to make sure Ukraine gets the money they ask for. No matter what your political stance, any leader weaponizing the judicial system and government agencies against a political opponent is concerning and one of the prime examples of a dictator. From censoring Trump's supporters on social media, labeling them domestic terrorists and jailing them, also seizing the phone of a sitting member of Congress in September of 2022, to hiring 87,000 IRS agents to go after anyone who didn't like his policies, and finally raiding Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, the examples are endless. While Americans lived through all of this, the Biden administration refused to take unscreened, unapproved questions from the press and has continued to hold firm that the state of the country is the best that it's ever been. So, my fellow Americans, who's the dictator? As we reflect on these events and policies, let us ask ourselves, is this the path we want for our country? A reality where our leaders govern by executive fiat and disregard the rule of law? Why don't we hear about these dangerous displays of authoritarianism on a daily basis? And most importantly, what can we do to ensure that our government remains accountable to the people and upholds the principles of liberty and justice for all? Thanks for listening.